All right, so it's live now. Just
Okay.
give the introduction. Hello, everyone who's watching. Welcome to another session in our social media tour. And today we're talking with African students from Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, and we're continuing our discussion on African art and activism. So we're going to talk some more about what these African students are interested in, their social topics, and what they kind of questions they have about art and activism. So let's start with introductions with the first person. If you want to say your name, tell us what you're studying, what country you come from, and then we'll pass it around.
Okay.
Um, Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm studying sociology, and my parents are from Eritrea.
Um, Hi, I'm Neema. I'm studying math major and I'm from Tanzania.
College in Lewiston, Maine, and
Uh,
we're
Hello, I'm Patu. I am majoring in chemistry and I'm from South Africa.
wonderful.
I am AC. I'm a chemistry major and I'm from Nigeria.
Hi, I'm Naima. I'm a psych major and I'm from Somalia.
Yeah, that should be all. Yeah, that's all of us.
Is everyone? Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. And the first question I'm going to ask you is how do you all experience art on a regular basis? Like, in what ways do you see and experience art?
Yeah. So I personally, coming from South Africa, the art that I see is basically through live performances, either in gamboots or the arts that is forced upon us in school. That's how I have experienced art. But coming to Bates, it has been more of in the theater and very European based. I don't know if that suffices as an answer, but that's how I've experienced art.
That's great. Next
Yep.
person?
Um, I really I can say that I've experienced art in dances,
Hmm.
the dance classes that I've taken. Yeah, like my PE classes as Bollywood. Yeah, that's as far as I've experienced arts.
Okay. Well, since I grew up in America, I learned about like the different types of arts, like going in museums and seeing like paintings and stuff in that nature. Coming into Bates, yeah, like what Patu said, like seeing like dance performances in like the theaters and like those types of arts you see here. So,
Great.
Uh, the art I understand is music, and that's the way I experience art. And African music is it's really good. It's really interesting, a variety of it, and including the pop culture, the high life, and all the great, music from all over the continent, not just Nigeria.
Okay.
Hi, I also grew up in the States, so like Hannah, I probably experienced it more than most of my peers here. So art classes and things like that are definitely where most of my experience comes from and interaction with art.
So, would any of you consider yourselves artists or people that are interested in art?
Um, I would consider myself as someone who's part of art, but not necessarily an artist, because I am the sound technician for the theater department here at Bates, but I
Hmm.
don't necessarily do anything artistic, so to
Hmm.
speak. It's more technical than artistic. So I wouldn't consider myself an artist, but
Okay.
just someone who facilitates the artwork.
So, the second question I'll ask you before you pass it on is
Right.
growing up, did you find that people around you encouraged you to be creative as an artist? Was this something that was discussed?
Uh, for me, it was some people around me didn't, but then in school, it was we. one of the classes was arts and culture, so it was a class that I had to take, and it appeared as if it was just for the grades as opposed to doing it for the sake of art, if that makes any sense. It was never really a conversation, or whether, like, I don't remember having any conversation with my parents or family of pursuing art or just drawing for fun or anything like that. So, no.
So, and sorry, last question. So, was
Yeah.
this experience through your studies at ALA, African Leadership Academy, or was this generally your whole experience, education experience?
So this is my general experience from before ALA. This is when, like, the high school that I went to and the primary school, which was
Okay.
13 years of my life. Um, but then at ALA, I experienced art in a different way, in the sense that there were more plays, and I got involved a bit more in the cultural shows in which we had to artistically showcase the different cultures that we have, um, the different cultures that we have across Africa. So that's how I experienced art in ALA.
Okay. Great. Let's talk to the next person.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. I wouldn't consider myself as an artist, but I've taken part in arts, I would say, like things like dances and things of that kind. And the closest I've experienced arts in my past school was taking things like vocational skills classes or needlework classes whereby you learn how to sew. Yeah. And it's not something that was very encouraged or common among my peers. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yes, I too do not consider myself an artist. I mean, I have taken art classes like growing up. Like they were kind of like requirements of my school. Like we would like do like drawings or paintings. But that was kind of like very limited. So that's kind of like all we did. But I mean, I like yeah, kind of it.
Okay.
What was the question?
Have you experienced art?
Have I?
Remember the first question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah, so the question was, wait, I forgot the question myself.
Would you consider yourself an artist?
Yeah, do you consider yourself an artist? And growing up, were you encouraged to pursue art, or did you discuss art with your parents or people around you?
No, no, not at all. I never actually thought about art. I knew art was beautiful and all, but I just didn't feel encouraged that that's what I can do. But the more I begin to learn about art, and the more I begin to experience art, I kind of see art in most of the things that I do, and even in chemistry and stuff. So it's something that I'm looking at from a different perspective than, you know, conventional, I think.
Okay, wonderful. Next person.
Hi.
Hi.
So as far as considering myself an artist, I don't per se consider myself an artist, but I think exposure to it I've been exposed to it a lot, not just through school, but also within the home setting. I think it depends a lot on how you define art. With my mother, she's very, fashion oriented and, making the house look and, feel nice. So having art on the walls and things that are traditional. So I think art is really dependent on how you define it. And in my case, I would say that I have been exposed to it a lot. And I think my mother would consider herself an artist, even though she didn't have that exposure in an academic setting, as in school or other places like that.
Tell me more about your mom's work in art.
I'm sorry?
Tell me more about your mom's interest and involvement in art.
My mom had a lot of pieces that were made by my grandmother, so she had a lot of hand-woven like baskets and things like that that she would, put up and around the house. So, when my grandmother is making them, it's not for the purpose of art only, it's also as a business. She owned a store where she used to sell them. So I think the combination of that really was appealing to my mom, so she kind of took that on a little bit here in the States, and she had those art pieces and, displayed them as well as sold them. and I think she really appreciated the authenticity of it. So it wasn't things you would buy at Walmart that you'd put up in a house. It was more of, art pieces that had stories behind them and had, family and all that behind it. So it was more beautiful in that sense. And I think that was something that I was always interested in, even though I didn't pursue it, greatly. But it's something that I know that I'll continue doing.
Great. So before you pass it on, I'll ask you the next question before we go. So the next question we're going to talk about, what we're going to talk about is, now that you're in the diaspora, how do you generally access African art? Is it through galleries or festivals or events? What are the kind of things you look out for that help you to reconnect with, let's say, your home country and the art from those places?
Is this directed towards me, or?
Yes, you can start and then we'll pass it back.
Okay. I would say the most art I see connecting to art from back home or at weddings and big celebrations like that. So we don't have formal museums and things like that would display them, but if there's a celebration, a wedding or a party, they would have, a ton of art pieces around, and it's passed on through the family. So you would wear the clothing that your grandmother might have worn for her wedding day, and you would have those pieces around at the party. So it's not like a formal, you come in and you pay to see an art piece, but more of a community aspect. Everybody comes, they look at what people have, and it's shared among people.
Okay. Okay.
Well, for me, I would mainly see it in I'm originally from Boston, so you can I can go to some certain stores, like African stores, and then talk to the people about them, and they have specific ones maybe from Nigeria or other countries in that region. And yeah, you can get some other, not only artwork, but other things in that nature too. So that's mainly where I see it. But I also see it in my house, when my parents come in, or when my aunts or uncles come back from Eritrea, they would bring in some gifts, so we can see have some on the walls and other things there.
Do you ever visit museums, let's say in New York, or I know this is the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston? Do you ever check out any of the African art exhibitions there?
No, I've never actually been to a Museum of Fine Arts there. I mean, I've only been to New York City once, so I haven't been to the museums there. No, not really.
All right.
For me, I would say I experienced at in my past school, we used to have cultural shows, African cultural shows, whereby we'll get to showcase things from our own countries, prepare dishes from our countries, and maybe dress up in our traditional costumes. That's when I would experience art. Yeah, I had to buy things, artistic things from Tanzania, which I'll be displaying. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I experience art mainly in the theater because I spent most of my time there, and it's in the form of plays and dances. But I generally just like to be in the part of the crew who is dealing with the lights or the sound, and that's how I usually experience art. Yeah, I'm not necessarily into pictures and artworks like that. Just dances and plays in the theater. So I experience that.
Okay. Wonderful. So move on to the next topic. So I asked you all to vote on the topics that you found most interesting in terms of social topics, and the ones that you voted and selected, the first one that came out that was most popular was the topic of sexuality. Second, tied for second, was both identity and religion. So those are the top three topics that you guys picked as topics that you found most interesting. And just let you know, these are topics that seem to be the common topics that young Africans are interested in today. So with the past poll that I did with Ashesi University and also with University of Waterloo, it was a common trend. So just so you can have that in mind as well. So the question I'm going to ask you is, with these topics of sexuality, identity, and religion, do you ever find these topics or themes being addressed in artwork around you? Or do you find that artwork, African art as you see it, is more visual and less thematic? I hope you understand the question.
Um, might not be the best person to answer this question, but from my experience, I haven't seen a lot of sexuality in African art. I've seen a lot of religion, but not sexuality. Where I grew up is not something that was discussed hotly. It's more like an assumption that
Yeah,
a guy is supposed to date a girl and a man is supposed to marry a woman. It's not a hot topic of discussion. So I think it's still in its budding stages. I'm sure, and I know, and I've seen artists that have their focus on sexuality and are trying to spur up the discussions on, the less less what do you call it?
it's
The
controversial.
homosexuality and heterosexuality. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so they exist, but it's not for me. It hasn't been a lot of exposure yet.
Okay. So the follow-up question. So you said you've seen quite a bit of religion in art. I want to know more about what kind of things you've seen. Like how has that been depicted? How have you seen religion depicted in art?
That's interesting. So Nigeria is a very interesting country when it comes to religion. Christians and Muslims live side by side, and most of the times actually in peace. But a lot of the times there are clashes, and those clashes are represented in the form of art. You get some graffiti art and paintings by rocks by the roadside when you're driving through, and um, but I think the most interesting part is not really the Christian Muslim uh, religious discussions. It's the Christian, like different different sects in Christianity are just fighting amongst themselves back through art. So people will just be airing their opinions through graffiti on the roadsides or through designs on large lorry trucks and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, so it's really interesting to read things like that when you're traveling on the road. Especially, I travel a lot, usually 9 hours, 8 hours on the road in Nigeria, and it's inevitable to not see something like that. To see something like
What parts of Nigeria have you seen this happening?
that. So I grew up in the southeastern part of Nigeria, and I studied in the north part of Nigeria. So the southern part of Nigeria are mostly Christians, and the northern part of Nigeria are mostly Muslims. And the rich people from the north, the Hausas, they are the ones that feed us in the south. So
Mhm.
when their lorries are coming down south, I see those lorries with all those art on them and stuff like that, with all the food in them. But then you see the lorries with a painting of Jesus and Mary, and the other side are saying thanks be to Allah and stuff like that. Um,
Wow.
it's very interesting. Okay.
Interesting. Wow, that's fascinating. All right,
Yeah.
so let's talk to the next person.
Oh, I keep covering the camera. Sorry. So artwork, in Islam at least, I'm from Somalia, which is majority Muslim. So artwork is limited to designs instead of people. So the sexuality obviously just goes out the window when it comes to that, because you don't have actual images, like you don't have figures,
Yeah.
But I think also living in the U.S., a lot of what you see are hypersexualized statues that sometimes are the typical African art, or what people label as that. So you'll see a lot of black women statues with obviously naked, and having all of these things that make it seem like people are understanding art in that sense, and understanding sexuality in Africa in that sense. So I think I've seen more of the mockery of it in the US than I have seen the positive sexual image, if that would exist in African art.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Next person.
Um, yeah, I would say the same thing, that the Tanzanian art does not incorporate sexuality. Most of the time, the arts depict lifestyle or either some lessons that they want to impact to the community. Yeah, but it has got nothing to do with sexuality.
Yeah. Being in South Africa this summer, I realized that a lot of art was focused mainly on HIV and AIDS and trying to raise awareness on HIV and AIDS. That was the art which I was most, that's the art that I observed the most as I was walking around, but not necessarily any art relating to religion or sexuality. Uh, but like I feel like I would see art that relates to religion if I go to a religious region, if I go to a place near the church, where that's where I'll see posters relating to religion. But homosexuality it's mostly during campaigns, or if I'm reading a newspaper that's reporting on a campaign to stop homophobia in South Africa. That's how uh, I've seen art come out to either to represent to try and represent homosexuality and this perspective that people have. So yeah.
Right. Is everybody?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the next thing we'll talk about then is art and activism.
Sorry.
How have you seen art being used for activist purposes? Have you seen any artists who've used their artwork um, to advocate for different issues? Is that something that you see commonly? If so, yes, and if not, you can talk about that as well.
Okay. Yeah, like I just said, I think there are a lot of activists out there, especially people who are trying to stop homophobia or raise awareness on homosexuality, just the different sexualities that are here. They use I don't know the particular names of the artists, but I've seen that them using posters try to raise awareness, like uh, like just depicting that you shouldn't be violent towards people who have a different sexuality to you or different religion to you. I've seen a lot of that kind of art.
Okay. Cool.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
So the question was, have you seen art and activism being paired together? So artists who advocate for different social themes using art as a channel to communicate what they think about different social topics.
Um, yes and no. I think I've seen it. Either I haven't looked for it, I have seen it, or I've seen it more with when there's something going on in a country. So, for example, a lot of the Middle East, uprisings have incorporated art. I know with graffiti and so I've seen it more through that. And I don't know if it's because I'm not looking hard enough for examples in African countries, but yeah.
Or when it comes to music, that's one of Nigerian's greatest activism. Sorry, what do you call it? Media for activism. And the name Fela comes to mind very readily if you know who Fela is. Fela Kuti was the biggest Nigerian musical activist during the military regime, and they killed him. He was assassinated by the incumbent president, the incumbent head of state then. So since Fela, I mean, artists have been trying to be like Fela and use music as a means to speak to the government and talk about the issues and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of activism in music. The more contemporary Nigerian activist is, I would say, Neka, a which is London-based. I forgot, but
Or German.
it's also a political activist that sings through music, I think. But there are a lot of them. I've seen art, I've seen paintings, if that's what you're talking about, but I think you are talking about more all encompassing. I've seen paintings and stuff like that, and I've seen other means of activism that look like art, but not necessarily art. Uh, yeah.
Okay, no problem. That's a good response. Anyone else?
Uh,
Okay. Well, I um I feel like I haven't seen I haven't really been like really aware or observed that much in the Eritrean art, but so like I feel like I haven't maybe looked for it like Naima said, but yeah.
Okay. So we'll start. I'll ask you the next question before we pass it on. What kind of questions do you have about art, about African art, about contemporary art? Are there any questions that you have that you wonder about that you haven't seen? Do you think that maybe there's a world out there that's, the world of art that's out there that you find maybe complex? Like, what kind of questions do you have about art?
Um I guess maybe well I don't have a lot of like um mm, I guess like maybe like one question would be like what makes them like do a certain piece? Like why do they think that? Like like if they want to like make something up like a little statue or something, like
Hmm.
why do you think why is that like important to them or something like in that nature?
Okay,
That would be
that's
a
a good
question for
question.
like yeah.
I think I would want to know how the African arts can incorporate the question of sexuality, given that it's controversial in the context itself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, my one question would be, why is it that a lot of Africans, un- a lot of underprivileged Africans do not necessarily are not able to make enough money for themselves or enough income for themselves using the art? Because a lot of people are very artistic out there, but they're not necessarily able to bring the art that they create into the market and still be successful. Whereas there are people who are in different countries who are still able to bring the artwork, which is not necessarily, I would argue, at par with what a lot of the Africans create and still be able to make money. Uh, yes. So just how you can make the artwork that a lot of people who are not necessarily well, who are poor in Africa to make money out of it.
my question kind of ties down to what Patu said, uh, how people can make money off of art. Because if you can't make money off of it, then you are not, persuaded to do it. Someone that has been making a lot of money out of her art is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie through her writing. But not a lot of people can write the way she does. She got an outstanding education that could make her do that. And like Patu said, there are people that are just naturally talented and they have a voice, they want to say something, but they can't say it because they can defend themselves when the time comes because they can make money off of that.
I'd be interested to know how art is defined within the African context. At least for Somalia, I'd say if someone writes poetry, they're a poet, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're an artist. So taking that into account, the language and the words used to describe it, I think the U.S. at least has a good grasp of what they consider art. So I would be interested to know um, how our Somali elders think of it. And um, sometimes it's within an economic context, making money off of it. But how do you know what's art and what's not art? Um, yeah, I'm interested in that.
Oh, great. Okay. So the last question I'm going to ask is a two-part question. The first question is, how do you see arts, ideally, in your imagination, how do you see arts impacting your home country and the continent? And then the second part of the question is, how do you see yourself impacting your country and your continent?
I think it will give, and it does give people a way to express themselves without necessarily tying it to an obligation. If you know what I mean. It's a way to show your talent without it having to be under, a science or a math or something along those lines. Because I know with a lot of parents, they want you to be practical about your education and about what you do so that it leads to a better future. But at the same time, I think if some importance is given to art, it will give students and people in general the freedom to express themselves in a way that isn't, constrained by what the standards set out as far as, what you do in your day-to-day and what you do in your life. What was the second part of that question?
How do you see yourself impacting your country and the continent?
Impacting it in terms of art?
No, any way, your strengths, any area.
I think I would bring a different ideas and a different mindset. I've had, the fortune to be living in a different country and within different countries in general. So I think sometimes the best ideas come from something new, not what is seen as traditional and what will work. So I think having the experience of seeing different places and talking to different people will give me the tools to kind of express what I'm thinking in different ways.
Okay. Cool.
So, like I said in my last film, I see like African writing has really like because there's been a surge in African writing at least over the last few decades, and I feel like we need such a revival for African art because the world does not yet recognize African art as well as they do African writing. We need a Chino Achebe or something. We need people to really encourage African art. We need our wealthy men um, to sponsor African art because there's been a large voice in art throughout revolutions worldwide, the World War, the Russian Revolution, and things like that. I feel like art is going to be a very, very huge part of growth in Africa, and so we need to encourage people to do that. For myself, um, I've also been privileged. I will call myself privileged to be able to uh, be out of the Nigerian education system. So this year. And I've learned a lot, living amongst other international students and of course living amongst Americans. Um, and I feel like I'll bring something to the soup. I'll definitely bring something to the table. And but I feel one thing that I really do know for sure is that African youth have a lot of energy. They just have unbelievable energy. And I mean, you can do well for yourself and do well for your country if you invest in African youth. So I definitely do want to invest in the youth. I want to work with the youth. I want to work with people of my age, and even when I grow old, I want to work with people that look like me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just so that because if you get them at that stage, then the future will be really bright for everybody. So, well, right out of college, I might be interested in going to teach in an African school, just so that I would get back into the mindset of how the African youth is, what the African youth needs, and that might build the rest of my career for me.
Okay. Just a follow-up question for you. Just from what you said. You said something about how the world needs to recognize African arts. Do you think which do you think needs to happen first? Do you think the world needs to recognize African arts, or do Africans need to recognize African arts? Which needs to happen first?
Oh, of course, Africans. One thing that I believe is really a big problem for Africans is confidence in local products. And that's why Dangote is the richest man in Nigeria because Nigeria has stopped importation of cement and other sugar and whatnot from foreign countries. And well, all the sugar we eat and all the cement we use and all other spices, everything is from Dangote and it's really good. He makes very good products. He invests back his money in Nigeria, and the economy is booming. And Africa is looking up to Dangote as the richest man because stocks are local and the local products are encouraged. So Nigeria got that right. They recognize local products. I feel like Africa should do that. I mean, in every aspect. It's not like we should cut off all ties to the world, but like we should really, really recognize and find ways to encourage both economically and locally, and even if you're gonna start with your families, tell my parents should really stop. They should chill out on becoming telling their sons to become medical doctors and stuff like that. Like I have a friend who is like a wonderful artist. Um, drawing is his passion and all that. He's great, but then he's struggling with the sciences, and he's losing focus on his art because he's trying to feel to get himself up to speed on the sciences and stuff like that. Um, we should encourage local products and we should encourage local talents and all these things local. So when Africans begin to recognize how good they are locally, then they can present themselves to the world. If that doesn't happen, there's no way we can go anywhere.
Okay, brilliant. That's the next person.
Yeah, I see art in South Africa, so to speak, impacting politics. Because in the past you have seen, like in Mozambique, art was very primary in the revolution, and I think that a lot of people, since a lot of people in South Africa are not necessarily literate or they're swayed by the good speeches that politicians give, if there were artists who were able to raise awareness on the corruption that goes on behind closed doors, or how effective the ruling parties are, or how people are fighting for the money, or how people are wasting taxpayers' money, and use arts to act to empower the people who are not necessarily literate but are able to interpret the art, then I think that would be a great way that art could impact South Africa. As far as my role, how I see myself impacting South Africa in the future, or Africa in general, I am very much interested in healthcare sciences and sciences in general. And I feel like a lot of people, a lot of students in high school. When I was in high school, I wasn't necessarily. Um, this is before I went to A-Level. When I was in high school, I wasn't necessarily given the opportunity to explore scientific research. And when I went to AL, I was given the opportunity to explore scientific research. And now I sort of grasp the scientific method and what goes on in the sciences, but I didn't get that exposure when I was in boarding school, public, semi-public, semi-private boarding school. I feel like a lot of students still deserve that opportunity to get a world-class education, and I would want to be part of that either by just creating small pilot projects to see how students fare when they're exposed to scientific research from a young age, or how students fare when they get college counseling, because that's something that doesn't happen, and not like students from rural areas are not do not necessarily know what goes in into applying to different universities. So it could be something it could be something really fun, and there are no graphic. I mean, there are some like art schools in South Africa, but that's something that's not it's not something that's very much promoted amongst a lot of the students. So if artists could use art to promote art schools, or artists invest in creating graphic design schools or art schools, that would be something that would impact the country in a very positive way, and actually create more opportunities and have people who are competent in different sectors actually explore their passion. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Those are great ideas you're sharing.
Um,
Okay. How do you see art impacting UHA or America?
um, well, I, well, okay, I'm not really, like my parents, when they came over here, they didn't really, give us the art culture. It was more of like, I mean, we did listen to like music and, in that type of form, but like, you know, that's like mainly the only thing. So,
Okay.
that.
All right.
All right. That's just like it's
Is that for
all.
everyone?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for making the time to have this conversation with me. You all shared very interesting perspectives, and I found it very fascinating. I think anybody else watching it would find it also very interesting. It's always interesting to find out what young people are thinking and their perspectives on these things, because there is a lot of information in African arts, but I think there is a disconnect between the industry and also connecting that with young people as well. So I'm really happy that you shared these great ideas. I'd like to see them put together. But I found that this conversation was very dynamic and probably the best chat we've had so far. So thank you for sharing all of your opinions. I will keep in touch with you by email. And for anybody who's watching, thanks for tuning in as well. And yeah, that's it. Unless anybody else has anything else to say.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.